Okay, so how to build a human-centered resume? All right, so as usual, I Googled to see, when was the first resume written, and it appears that Leonardo da Vinci's resume was the first historically recorded resume, which he wrote to the regent of Milan, who was looking for an architect and an engineer to redesign his castle in 1482. So that's Da Vinci's resume. I think his paintings look better than his handwriting, but I was just thinking. Even in the first resume, it's a lot of words, and if you look at it closely, you can see he has struck out lines and everything. I'm sure there was no, Microsoft Word to edit it for him those days. So. Yeah, that's the resume. But then when I thought about the current type resumes, it's still a lot of words. It's just that, it's in a template. It's formatted differently. People can kind of do it like few different ways. Either they highlight their functional expertise in the resume, or they kind of do it in a chronological order, or, they are kind of doing a combination of both. But the resume is still, a lot of words. It's anywhere, between a short resume like 150 to maybe like 350 words for a very lengthy resume. So next slide, Ganesh. So just a brief history on how things have evolved when it comes to drafting of a resume. So it's, the 1400s to the 1900s, as you saw, was mostly handwritten letters of introduction to acquaintances. So like if you wanted a job, somebody had to kind of refer you to that particular position. So the resume was kind of functioning both as a referral as well as what you're capable of. That kind of started changing in the 1900s when the resume kind of became more about yourself, where you started telling your own stories and what you are capable of. And this is when, resumes became an institution. It kind of became the norm that if you need a job, you need a resume. And then the 1900s also saw the digital revolution. There was this video resume, which was quite a catchy concept for time. And then, of course, came Microsoft Word with their resume templates. So, and then, Da Vinci's resume kind of went from a handwritten to more of a template and a formatted kind of resume. Then in the 2000s, we saw the birth of social media and, of course, LinkedIn, which again, if you think about it, kind of ties back to the earlier days of the resume where, it's kind of, LinkedIn is a professional networking site, as well as you kind of have your skills and accomplishments listed. So it's kind of serving as a referral as well as, telling something about yourself. Of course, and then in LinkedIn, you have the option of putting a picture in your profile. But does that really make a resume human-centered? Was the question I was asking. Next slide, Ganesh. So then I decided to see if I can kind of flip out my resume, which is still that Word document. So what I did was I wanted to kind of show who I was as a person instead of that wordy resume. So I took a few of the things that said who I was. First of all, people need to know where I was educated, some of my competencies, my technical expertise, and kind of gave a timeline of, where I worked. And all these actually capture what I have tried to accomplish in 300 words in my resume. So it gives a brief snapshot of me, and sometimes people are just looking to see who you are as a person before diving into, what you have accomplished or what you're capable of. But one of the things that I found was still missing was the human element in it. So my picture is there. So I am at least on my resume right now. And of course, you can see that I've switched from a Word template to a PowerPoint template because it allows you to be a little more creative. But if you look at the competencies part and the technical expertise that I've listed, they kind of are telling the same thing. I mean, the competencies is more at a 30,000-foot view, and the technical expertise is kind of diving a little more deeper. But it really does not highlight my social emotional skills or, you know, who I am as a person. So next slide, Ganesh. And that's the big question, like why do you need human-centered resumes? And as Ganesh mentioned, like, you know, how do you kind of have the right talent? And right talent doesn't always come with having the right technical expertise. There are a lot of other things about a person, like, you know, how does a person work under stress? What is the person's learning style? What kind of projects excite a person? All these social emotional skills are not captured in the way the resumes are currently written. And that doesn't really help you tell your complete story to a person who is hiring you or to a team that you want to join. So a lot of these skills and a lot of these soft skills and these social emotional skills are kind of, you know, never told. And sometimes the issue is you probably do not, I mean, you probably know who you are as a person, but sometimes, you know, you do not have those crystallized nuggets of information about yourself to build that resume out. So that's when, you know, I thought I will try out Ganesh's tool. And if you go to the next slide, so his application provides you with a little bit of a report, and Ganesh, jump in if you want to add a few more things. It provides, like, you can pick a job and then you can go and download your LinkedIn profile, and it kind of gives you a tool, gives you a report as to, you know, what kind of a person you are. For example, for this particular job for a data scientist, and I hit the score because it was not that great, but
Come on, what about this confidence without attitude, right? Or a little bit of humor, come on now. I mean, as long as it's not single digits, even if it's single digits, just tell us it's on a scale of 1 to 10.
It was 60%, okay? But anyway, what it gave me was my top working styles. It said I was enterprising, I was conventional, and I was investigative. So these three words kind of gave me those little nuggets upon which I felt I could refine my competencies and make my resume more human-centered by actually telling, you know, what kind of a person I am. So if you go to the next slide, and this is still a work in progress, but when I'm going to be highlighting my competencies, instead of putting like deal advisory, which, you know, I am very competent at, I would say, you know, I'm a creative problem solver on deal advisory teams or something to that effect. So it kind of shows that, you know, on a deal, if you need out of the box thinking, maybe I'm a person or a human that you can count on. And this is, as I said, is still a work in progress, but when I'll be highlighting my competencies, I'm going to be weaving in more of the social emotional components so that my employers or my team get to know a little more about me. And if they want more details, they can, of course, go ahead and click on those embedded PDFs I have to see more details about what I've actually done. So if you go to the next slide, Ganesh. And I think I'll hand it over to Ganesh to kind of talk a little bit more about his platform and answer any questions that people may have. Any questions?
Yeah, I think that's I'll at least just ask you one, and maybe if you have a question, just unmute yourself and I'll see you in the queue and I can pop you in. But my first question is, you know, when you said enterprising, if you go back to the previous slide there, it said something like, you know, enterprising sales leader. right, when we're in business school, we're taught to get very granular, very specific, and then that seems very broad. And so how do you balance the tradition of granularity with, you know, what may seem like broadness or vagueness around these statements?
So I think, as I said, this is still a work in progress. So when I would probably put in a little bit of a story as to when my enterprising sales leadership was at its best. Like, you know, enterprising sales leader when it came to dealing with some customer problem or something like that. So kind of like, if you think about it, design thinkers often have their portfolios where they have all their case studies and everything. So I'm kind of trying to pull a few elements from that and tell a very brief story in my competency part of my resume, so that, you know, it exactly says what kind of a person, how enterprising I was in a particular situation. So
Cool. Jamie.
Hi, Shamali. I'm Jamie. I'm calling
Hey.
in from Vermont at the moment. First of all, I love your
Okay.
resume. And I just had a quick question. You know, so many times I'm in the medical field, and so many times I hear that I need my resume needs to be as standardized as possible so that it doesn't stand out and to follow the same format. So how would you, like, what is your advice for
And just to
telling
be
an
clear,
advisor?
just to be clear, Jamie's a med student, and so I think maybe she's looking at it through the lens of in the medical field, but I think it's a great question when there is hyper standardization, right, Jamie?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely, and that's an awesome question. And even now, recruiters tell me to make sure that my resume has a certain format. And one of the advices they give me is be as anonymous as possible. I mean, nowadays even resumes shouldn't have your name or something like that, so that people are not biased. You know, that's kind of the trend which is there. But I think you can always have your formatted resume embedded in this kind of a format, so that people have the option of looking at the normal format, because the conventional format is not going to be replaced anytime soon. But my thinking is, with this pandemic, where more people are going to be working virtually, it's a good time to kind of look at the resume through a new lens and at least, you know, make an attempt to show people who you are as a person, because in the virtual world that becomes even more difficult. And yes, I mean, stick to the format, but I'm just trying to hide that format and bring out the human in the resume over here. So that's kind of the whole idea. Did I answer?
I think that's great. And
yeah.
Sorry, Jamie, go ahead.
No, I think that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, the point I was going to add was, when I often coach students, I say, and they're going into a field that has a very standardized resume, it's this sense of, well, you know, what type of company do you want to work for? And sometimes writing a resume is also, we always look at resumes as an act of inclusion. How do I get included in this company? But understand that resumes can also be an act of exclusion, as a way to, if you lead with some of these character-based qualities, they may, and a company isn't looking for that, you may self-select out. Greg, thanks for raising your hand. What was your question?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute.
No problem,
first of all, thank you so much. This is a very interesting talk. It's something I've thought a lot about too. I tried once using Enhanced CV. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's a website that lets you kind of build a slightly more designy focused resume. And I guess my question has always been, what do you save for the interview? I mean, the reality is that all this is just, you know, every resume is just a foot in the door. And sometimes the foot in the door is something else altogether. So I guess ultimately, how do you determine what part of those stories from your prior jobs do you save for the questioning and for the interview itself? I mean, every interview I've ever been in, the first thing they do is they just look at a title and they say, you know, tell me more about that job. they're not reading any of that granularity that I included underneath anyway. So I guess from your perspective, how did you sort of go about interviewing people who read a lot of interviews, and what was their feedback? And I'm just curious about sort of like, what do they want to say for the interview?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So again, this is just an idea. I mean, the conventional process would take a lot more to kind of change. But as you said, right, Greg, they look at a title and there is a lot of bunch of, bullet points underneath it, and they are obviously not reading it, and they're asking you, hey, can you tell me about it, right? So in the interview, and or the recruiters are doing, keyword searches to pick up stuff. And I have had recruiters reach me for jobs for which, some keyword matched, and I was clearly not a fit. So I had to have a conversation with the recruiter saying, hey, I think, I'm not a great fit for this job. And they're like, no, everything matches. Hiring manager wants to talk to you. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll do the interview. And when I do the interview, even the hiring manager is looking at my resume and he's like, oh, you have done this, this, and this. Can you tell me a little more about this? So, and that's the point where I tell him that, hey, I have done this in this particular context, but I think, if I am not misunderstanding, is you're looking for these skills in a different context. So I take that opportunity to kind of say that, this is who I am. And if that still resonates with me, we move forward. But sometimes it doesn't. They're like, I was misled by this, resume or something like that. I'm like, yeah, my resume was not supposed to mislead you. It's just that, you were not paying attention to who I was as a person, right? Now, do you want the title? Do you want the technical expertise? Or do you want somebody like, who doesn't have the technical expertise exactly matching to your job requirements, but, I am an enterprising person, and this is how I have done things in a different setting. Does it still appeal to you? And if so, we can have a conversation. So, and that's how I have handled it so far, but, I am still testing the waters. Did I answer your question, Greg?
Yeah, I think your experience is definitely, I think, sort of a testament to the fact that there isn't really a fine line between what goes on the resume and what do we talk about during the interview. And yeah, perhaps if job applications made it more clear, sort of what they wanted on their resumes, this could all be avoided.
Yeah, and that's actually the second part of it, because the job descriptions, sometimes companies don't know what they want. I mean, it's just, there is this job description template. They're like, oh, we need headcounts, and then it goes to the HR or recruiter, and they probably have a predefined template which they populate, and out comes the job requirements, which probably is not what the team is actually looking for. So, and that's the second phase of the disruption, where you can use some kind of ethical AI component to figure out what exactly should be the job description, and how are you going to find that right person.
This is Clark. Just a quick comment, Shamali. An observation about this is that recruiters actually have the job of finding reasons to say no, and a resume is giving them the opportunity through keyword search and some other analytics to find those reasons. What's interesting about the approach is this is a resume that's a storytelling format built to have them find the thing to say, that's interesting, I'd like to learn more. And then the stories about your jobs, there's always more to say about any job you've had. And so I think what this disruption suggests is to approach the process of finding a new job from the standpoint of getting to yes as opposed to getting to no. Now, I say all of that, and I should say that I am completely unemployable and I haven't looked for a job in 20 years. So take it with a grain of salt. This is probably all nonsense.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, what a part of me feels that it's not a yes or no. It's more like finding the right yes, because there may be a lot of yeses, but sometimes, you know, we just don't find which is the best fit for us. So that is also another aspect to it. Yep. Any other questions?
I'm excited to hear Ganesh. He probably doesn't get that very often, but you know, it's a Friday morning, man. Let's pick him up.
I know, and Shamali has set the context so well that I'm now sweating, thinking, "Oh my God, I need to."
Exactly.
Oh, come on, Ganesh.
Yeah. But thank you guys for this opportunity. And as Shamali was saying, right, I just wanted to give you more context in terms of how this is becoming more important in this current era, and especially when you think about the current era, it's all about COVID and how people are disrupted in their day-to-day activities, and not only in the day-to-day activities, many people have also unfortunately lost their jobs. uh, as this is happening in real time, I think the aspect of core motivations and showing your true self versus just what you know becomes a lot more important factor as you apply for a role, right? And if that's okay with you, Jeff and Clark, I would love to basically switch the slides to the format so that the formatting is looking a little better. And
Please, no problem at all.
with that
See,
being
Shamali is a consultant, and that's her first instinct is to get the client's template. I want, you know, this is an espresso. You can preach in your own language, man. If this is your PowerPoint, your language, run with it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So from the context of digital transformation, right, people talk about this every day. And for the past 10 years, I would say there has been a new role that has been created called as Chief Digital Officer. But if you maybe fast forward 3 to 5 years and look back, I would say COVID-19 was a big factor for all of us to fundamentally see how we can do our things differently and better, right? And if you look at some of the statistics, I was just pulling up some of the stats. Just in the month of March, we saw a 90% increase in virtual applications being downloaded both in iOS and Android. And if you look at some of these blurbs that are coming from the big companies like Microsoft, Cisco, or Zoom, anywhere between 10x to 500% increase in terms of the usage month over month, which is astounding. And the key part here is we are kind of forced right now to adapt ourselves into this new normal. And the new normal is, hey, how do I connect with my team members more virtually? How do I connect with my recruiters more virtually? How do I connect with my hiring managers more virtually? And this is fundamentally changing the way humans connect, communicate, and collaborate. And this is very true. And this is so fundamental that as we come out of COVID-19, there are many things that are bound to change. And a big change would be seen more on the employee base. A big change would be seen, how do you recruit people? A big change would be seen with respect to how do you understand a talent coming into the pool? And this is something that we are already seeing with companies that we are working with. And that's something that I want to bring it up in this call is the aspect of your core motivations and value become a lot more important factor now versus any time else. The reason is simple. Virtually, when you're trying to connect with your recruiters or with your hiring managers, you try to project a certain persona. You're trying to promote that, hey, I'm the best fit, I'm collaborative, I'm innovative in nature, and hire me, I can change the world. But in reality, the way they read may be very different. They may see this as a person who is not having the right skills from the soft skills perspective. It looks like this person has a lot more technical details. I'm looking for somebody who's more social in nature. Maybe I would not take this talent. Let's move on to the next talent, right? So how do you bring out more about not just what you know, but who you are? And that's the concept that is becoming a lot more important factor for us right now versus any time else. How do you bring back the human into your resume? Not only your skills and experience, which is absolutely required. Without that, you can't even start the conversation, but also the motivations and values that drive your decision-making process. And these are the soft skills that we are already seeing some of the recruiters are picking up at scale. And they are trying to see what is the best way to do that, because that's how there are two things that are happening. Recruiters, if you think about them, they're also running a business. They want to basically find an edge in terms of submitting a talent as they give it to the hiring managers. And if every recruiter is just saying that, hey, this person is Java, 10 years experience, this person has led 10 people, it doesn't add any more flavor in terms of presenting a talent to the hiring manager. So they have to also look for an opportunity to bring out more humanness. And right now it's very hodgepodge. And that's what we are trying to do, is help the talent bring out the core elements of who they are. And the only way, and this is going more into neuroscience and more into clinical psychologists, is the only way you can understand the core motivations of every talent is not ask a single question. Because fundamentally, the moment I tell a talent, hey, you're going to apply for a role, they always think and basically try to format their resume. And many times that it becomes a factor for them to get filtered into or outside the process. But this only represents 10% of who you are from the world of psychology. The other 90% is driven by some of the subconscious influences that drives your decision-making process. What we have built is a system that gives you the ability to tap into your subconscious motivations, positive strengths, and highlight those with respect to a particular opportunity that you're applying. So that as you're going into a sales role, if we see you're a person who is social as well as you are realistic in nature, we will give you nuggets saying that, hey, you not only can deal very well with customers, you have the ability to have more empathy, but also you have the ability to close the deals because you're realistic in nature, you're task oriented, you're goal oriented. So those aspects of not only saying I have hit 100% of my quota versus how you hit based on your personality becomes a lot more important factor, right? And one of the key things that we have also learned in this process is we have to align to some of the industry standards. Without aligning to industry standards, if I give you a nugget, it may not resonate with a recruiter or a hiring manager because they always have certain terminologies baked in as they basically have built their career. So there are three industry standards that we have aligned to. One is called as ONET standard, which basically says based on a particular job, what are the technical and non-technical skills you need to have as you apply for that role. Similarly, Gardner's learning style and Holland's occupational insight are two, I would say, industry standards that we have aligned to. One says what style of content would appeal to you as a talent so that you learn quickly on the job and start performing better. And the other one talks about what kind of jobs may suit your personality. And the reason, just stepping back and giving you the reason why we are picking these attributes, is back in 2014, when we started the venture, it was very important for us to understand how does the industry look for the talent? What are the things that they look for to make a decision beyond skills and experience? And we went to 150 companies, which included Fortune 500, Fortune 50, small and medium business, government agencies, and even startup companies. And we asked a very simple question to the general managers or the founding members who basically set the context of how do you hire for a given organization? What are the values that you look for beyond just skills and experience? And there was a common answer given by each individual, which primarily looked for not only skills and experience of you as a talent, but they are also looking for, does your personality match well with the job? And that's what they try to gauge when they bring you into the interview process. Do you have the ability to learn on the job based on the requirement as per what the requirement is from the job and start performing quickly and better? And that's one of the reasons we look for Gardner's learning style and Holland's occupational insight. And they were not only keen to know your dominant attributes, which is very important for them to identify if your personality would match well with the team that you're getting in. Because end of the day, you may have the right talent, you may have the great personality, but if you can't blend well with the team, everything goes south, right? So what we then said is that if these are the standard framework that you're looking for, how do I identify that and show it back to you as a talent, so that when you go into an interview process, you talk to the recruiters and hiring manager in this context, even though they may not have an understanding of what questions that they need to ask, you can present a two-page report, or it can be a detailed report as you go into the interview process, showing them more about who you are, what are your strengths with respect to these factors that directly hits upon every job in the world.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So this is obviously how I guess my fear is that this may actually be more sound reasoning than most companies actually use to hire people. If I asked a company what's your hiring process based on, I don't know that anybody even has a model they follow. Is
No,
that
they
the
don't.
case?
They don't. Nobody has any model. It's like a wild west. Most of
Yes.
the companies are wild west. There are only maybe Fortune 5, maybe Fortune 500, some companies who are growing at scale. When they have a pain of not finding the talent is when they pay attention. Till that time, nobody pays attention to these factors. And
Excellent.
they basically focus more on business partners. They call it the business partners, which are recruiting firms. And those guys are the people who have some kind of framework that they look for when they're hiring somebody before they show it to the hiring manager, or
Right.
they screen somebody before they show it to the hiring manager.
And that a lot of times that framework is just, oh, I know the industry and I know what the industry needs.
That is correct.
Yeah.
So they know the industry, they know the keywords that the managers are looking for, and that's
Right.
how they basically prune through the resume, tons and tons of resume.
So
And
tell us, disrupt the status quo here, Ganesh. Let's go. Come on, give us a good old fashioned California earthquake, man. Shake it up.
I'm trying. But in a nutshell, what we are doing is it has two flavors of the business. We are working with recruiters, we are working with the hiring managers, and what I'm giving you is a nugget that many of the companies are adapting it, because end of the day they have realized the process is broken. There is no framework, and it's very hard for them to even pick the right person to begin the phone interview process. What we have built is a system that helps them to go through the aspect of your strengths and technical insights and match it to a particular role. And we tell them, hey, maybe you should start with these people who have not only the skills but also these personalities that match well for that job. And in return, we also go back to the talent and we ask them to say upload their resume. And you can, by the end of this call, I'll share a link. You can do that for free. We basically align to these standards and we come back with, for a given role that you're applying, what is the fitment that you would see with respect to technical and non-technical, so that you are well prepared even before you apply for the role. Hey, is this the place that I want to apply for? Because I know the skills as well as the personality may not match well, and those things may be picked up as a part of the interview process. How about I just pick the ones where my personality and skills match the highest? So this
Yeah.
helps
Can I jump in with a question that
the
came in on the
talent.
chat, a comment, which I think is really very timely and insightful, is this question of, if there is not a model or method, well, let me phrase it two ways. If there's a model or method, does that create a homogeneous outcome? And then
Yes.
are the current unmodeled processes partially responsible or one of the barriers to creating a more diverse workforce? So what's the balance
Absolutely.
between the status quo, what we see as a lack of diversity, and does your model address that?
Absolutely. I think that's a very good question, because the key aspect, as I was sharing the framework that we heard from the hiring managers or the hiring recruiters, was they were not only looking for your technical skills, but also your working style, your learning style, your dominant. And the fourth component was compatibility attributes. That's something that we extract as a part of your personality. And what that talks about is, what are the complementary attributes I should look for this person as they interact with another person or as they interact within a job. Not the same attributes, because you need to have complementary attributes that make diversity of thoughts. And diversity, in my opinion, is a very we would probably need 1 more hour just to talk about that. But it's such a broad term and people use it very loosely. So diversity to me has two ways of looking at it. It's basically diversity of gender, race, ethnicity, that can be humanly managed. You may say, I need equal division of male and female, I need certain ethnicity, I need certain age to be included as a part of my hiring process. But diversity of thoughts, though, those are so hard to understand. And that's what we are trying to do, is the aspect of going deeper, where humans kind of pause in terms of their thinking and the structure breaks, is where the machines can come in. If you can feed that logic of understanding what are the complementary attributes seen so far, based on all the parameters. We have 150 attributes that we have collected so far in our database about every human interaction. Out of that, every attribute, who are the complementary attributes that you should look for as a part of team match or basically job match. That's what makes a process more diverse as a part of probabilistic tool. I still call this as a probabilistic tool. This can never be a deterministic tool. End of the day, humans, nobody can, it's my personal opinion, we're not in a position to beat humans. That may
Yeah.
that may happen in the next 10 years. This basically gives you directional understanding.
Nice, thanks, Ganesh. I want to leave time for some Q and A's in there, but for some Q and A's at the end. But if I'm on this call and I'm in a position where I'm employed and looking to transition, or I'm unemployed and I'm looking to get back into what's an even more competitive job market, you know, how do we access your platform, or how do we take some of the are there templates of what Shamali talked about? What's something that someone on this call could walk away with to help their job search? No pressure.
Of course. In terms of that particular instance, I'm just sharing a link in the chat window. So this is a link where you can take your assessment for free. We don't charge you as a part of taking your assessment. And I'm just putting it in the chat window. Hopefully you would see that coming through. Feel free to click on the link. What it does is it allows you to upload your resume. We go through a 1-minute colors and contrast test. And through these patterns, we identify what are your core strengths from your working style perspective, your learning style perspective, your dominant and compatibility attributes, what are your workplace values seen. And based on those parameters, we give you either a 2-page report that you can download and submit it as a part of your resume as you're applying for a role, or it can be a detailed report, which is like 8 pages, which can be carried over as you go into an interview process. Hand it over to the hiring manager so that they know more about who you are versus what you know.
Yeah, I think putting back the who in the resume is is what is important. And, I mean, the what has to be there. I mean, it still has to follow that format. That's not going to change. But I think there is a large component of the who that is missing in the resume, and that was kind of what set me thinking as to how can I do this differently.
And there is no silver bullet here, guys. In terms of by doing this, it's not a given thing that you would get a job, but it brings out more aspect of who you are before even the recruiters meet with you. And especially as everything is going virtual, this becomes a lot more important factor as you're trying to connect with people who are decision makers.
Nice.
Yeah, I'll just pause here. The link is shared
Yeah,
in the
please.
chat
If
window
you'd like to
so
ask
that
a
you can.
question, just unmute yourself and I'll see you in the queue. Or if you just want to drop it in the chat, either way. This is really a fantastic tool. And even if it's something, you know, I can even see an opportunity to use this if you're working on a quarterly business review, or if you have an annual business review and you just want to feed your accomplishments for the last year into it and see how your resume's evolved over time. That would be interesting. One question that comes to my mind is, you know, if I have a job description for a job that I'm interested in, how do I use your tool to help me put my best foot forward, shall I say?
I think that's a very good question. So we actually are in the process of building with one of the partners who would be coming out with a product, Royal Bank of Canada. The product would be out by the end of this month, where you can just paste a job title and description, paste your resume on the left side, paste your job title description on the right side, and we can give you very detailed nuggets in terms of how do you enhance your resume to bring more of your humanness into the resume, which includes not only seeing if you're using more active versus passive voice, you're using more quantifiable words, but also how do you highlight saying that if the job is looking for more social as well as more realistic person, how do you bring those elements if that is seen for that particular talent applying for that position. So we basically help you with formalizing with certain sentence, giving you some cues, so that you just have to copy and paste, and it automatically gives you a resume which is almost 90% there. 10% you may have to proofread and make sure everything looks okay before you save it and apply it for the job.
Yeah. Clark, did you want to add something?
I did, Jeff.
Please.
The hiring, well, I'm actually pulling a page now from how Jeff and I market our firm, which is we try to have our clients pre-qualify themselves out of contention if we can. And this is what I like about the resume approach, which is, you don't want every job that's out there. You want the job that works right for you. And the extent that you're infusing the humanness in it says that you want a human culture. The degree to which you put preferences around your work style and your skill sets, the color pieces, is the extent to which a company that is all about just the numbers and lockstep performance, that's not a place you want to work anyway. And so I like that this has, it's broadcasting a message to eliminate a lot of the jobs and companies that you would be miserable in anyway. And if you join them, you're simply wasting 6 months of your life doing something that you shouldn't be doing. So I like that getting rid of a lot of the potential jobs process as well. And I think that's a huge asset to this approach.
Thank you, Clark.
Yeah, thank you.
I just had one quick comment, because I'm taking a human resource management class right now. And the way we're learning, we're right in the middle of studying hiring, recruiting, hiring, interviewing. And all the case studies, they show, so many different ways that are completely inconsistent. There's like very little consistency with these different companies. But the one consistency is they ultimately, no matter what the skills and background and experience is, they ultimately, almost everything hires for culture fit for the company. So kind of to your point, Clark, and also the personality being so important in terms of who they choose in the end. So I think that's really, it's a more multidimensional approach that actually speaks to why people often actually select in the end. And of course, that's all theoretical because it's in school. It's not right now, but it just struck me because I'm studying that right now.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Janice. That was really well said. Thank you. Shamali, Ganesh, did you have a last word you wanted to put in, or any key takeaways you want our audience to remember as we go forward, besides use the tool?
Yeah. I mean, as I think as we are in, like, it's an unprecedented time for all of us, and post-COVID is, we don't know when would be post-COVID. We are all going to be in uncharted territories. And one of the things that I'm seeing is a lot of these smaller companies or startups, their whole fabric is kind of being torn at this point because of all the layoffs or lack of funding or the uncertainty. So these teams that actually made these startups successful, the very fabric of any successful startup, are being ripped apart. Now, post-COVID, again, thinking of it in a broader term, all these teams have to somehow find their way back to each other, or kind of form those connections again. And this is where I think people need to kind of look into themselves and see who they are as a person, so that they can be part of the next disruptive technology or next big idea, just by just not by looking for a job, but by going to the right job, because going to the right job, which is the best fit for you, would actually maximize your potential.
Yeah, well said.
So,
Yeah, and just adding to what Shamali said, right? I think the core aspects that is becoming very critical factor is, and this is very counterintuitive, and sometimes it's very hard to do, is how do you make a decision which is not driven by need, right? This is fundamental to every human. Every human is driven by need. How do you decouple that and go towards the aspect of what motivates you? And if you can use some of these tools to not only identify your strengths, but also align those opportunities, it can serve purpose not only for yourself, getting into this job quickly, finding yourself in a place where you really like, and you can grow your career quickly, but also the enterprise would love to have you for a much longer time. So it starts with you making the right decision as you get into the roles. And one of the best ways, identify who you are and what motivates you. And with that being said, I also shared a link in the chat window. This is something that Learn at Forbes is part of one of our partners. They have integrated our technology. There's more like an AI counselor for the folks who are looking for new opportunities. How do you upskill yourself? So this is something that you can take as a test, where you take the understanding of your skills, technical and non-technical, and for the roles that you're applying, through our machine learning models, we can identify the skill gaps and prescribe what are the courses that you should go for that would align to the skill gaps. So that can also help you as a part of upskilling as you're always going into the new role. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Oh, absolutely, Ganesh. This is super cool. And that's, I definitely have that link loaded up to take a deeper look. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this morning. Thank you for the great questions and feedback. Shamali, Ganesh, thank you. Clark, any final words? Thumbs up from Clark. We're good.
We're good. Thank you both.
All right.
Yep.
Well, we'll see everyone next week. June is our takeover month. So we're actually going to have talks hosted by frequent attendees. So it'll be guests outside of our circle, and Dr. Jeff Cohen will be leading next week's talk. And Greg, who you see here, will be speaking in 2 weeks. And our friend Johan will be leading the call in 3 weeks. So I'll send out a list of that, but please stay tuned for that series. And then in July, we're putting together a series of designers to talk about speculative futures, prototyping, etc. And again, I'll send out details there, but just wanted to give you a little bit of insight into where we're headed. So again, thank you everyone. Have a great Friday, great weekend, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Good luck. Bye-bye.